Hello, everyone. My name is Süss, and I'm the moderator tonight for the First Fridays Art Talk. So welcome to the First Fridays Art Talk. There are a whole bunch of art events and galleries open and sales of stuff all over the exchange tonight. Hello, everyone. My name is Süss, and I'm the moderator tonight for the First Fridays Art Talk. So welcome to the First Fridays Art Talk. There are a whole bunch of art events and galleries open and sales of stuff all over the exchange tonight. Hello, everyone. My name is Süss, and I'm the moderator tonight for the First Fridays Art Talk. So welcome to the First Fridays Art Talk. There are a whole bunch of art events and galleries open and sales of stuff all over the exchange tonight. Hello, everyone. My name is Süss, and I'm the moderator tonight for the First Fridays Art Talk. So welcome to the First Fridays Art Talk. There are a whole bunch of art events and galleries open. Hello, everyone. Thanks for standing by. My name is Süss, and this is the First Fridays in the Exchange Art Talk. So there are so many things happening in the Exchange tonight. There are many galleries open. There are a lot of sales, which I'm going to tell you about. Hello, everyone. Thanks for standing by. My name is Süss, and this is the First Fridays in the Exchange Art Talk. So there are so many things happening in the exchange tonight. There are many galleries open. There are a lot of sales, which I'm going to tell you about. Hello, everyone. Thanks for standing by. My name is Süss, and this is the First Fridays in the Exchange Art Talk. So there are so many things happening. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. We are just going to promote a few things that are happening around town today. And just going to start with there's like a chili and stuff event happening at the Edge Gallery tonight as well. Our guests are at Urban Shaman tonight, and at Urban Shaman tonight, they are open until 7. So if you're out and about and you just think to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm just going to go to Urban Shaman right now and tune into the Art Talk later, go for it. So they've got their 50 to 500 show and sale members show and sale, which we'll hear more about. But they've got that show and sale is open until I believe it is the 9th of December. So we've I'd also want to just highlight a few other things. If you're curious about everything all at once, which I'm not going to tell you everything, but you can check out our socials. We've got quite a few posts on Instagram And on Facebook, we're sharing a lot of the goings on. So I just want to share some of the things that are happening with you in the atrium at the Royal Albert. There is the Yule Market that is happening there. And all along Albert, there's just like so many things happening as well. And also on Arthur, so many things. And excuse me, there's also a dance performance at 100 Arthur on the second floor. And at Video Pool, there's a bunch of stuff happening as well. In Utopia, there are some sales of goods happening there. And as I mentioned, the Edge, they're open from 5 to 10 for their holiday sale and chili bowl fundraiser. So that there will also be live music there, so that'll be tons of fun. Our favorite stationery store, Seduta, is open right in the corner of Albert and Arthur, and really, like, there's just so much happening tonight. As well at Ace Art, there's an open rehearsal with independent dancers and live musicians, so you can drop in while movement artists and musicians are playing for People Part, which is a direct dance and live music happening on December 4th at 8 p.m. at the Rachel Brown Theater. So there will be long and short instant compositions, immediate in spirit, and direct from the nervous system. So if you want to check out any other past live shows or something, you can go to our website at www.firstfridayswinnipeg.org and check out any other stuff there, as well as see past art talks. So I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement. And if you want to say it out loud to yourself at home, you can. So this is the one I'm using today. So the First Fridays organization was started in order to encourage people to come to the Exchange District in Winnipeg. And we acknowledge that the Exchange District is located within Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Nahinaweewak, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We acknowledge that our water comes from Treaty 3 territory, and much of our hydroelectric power comes from Treaty 5 territory. And we'd like to work together towards a greater understanding and acting on how to decolonize art, artistic practice, and public discourse. So thank you for joining our talk today. Our talk is called Stories and Dreams, Past, Present, and Future from Winnipeg's Indigenous-run Center, Urban Shaman Contemporary Aboriginal Art. So I'd like to welcome our guests, Debbie Keeper and Louis Ogemah, to discuss the current member show and sale, Louis's installation Regeneration, as well as Indigenous arts organizations in Winnipeg's past, present, and dreams of the future. I just want to say a few things about you, Debbie. And that's, I was just going to read some things from your bio. That you're a multidisciplinary artist and interim curator at Urban Shaman Contemporary or Aboriginal Art. And you received your Bachelor of Fine Arts honors degree from the U of M. You've made work in a variety of mediums, theater, video, photography, and poetry. And you've always been a creative person and artist, and you've made an impact in the art world in many ways, including your work at the Banff Center for the Arts. And your video work has been exhibited locally, nationally, and internationally in the broadcast medium and at a variety of festivals and events. And Louis, I'm just going to read a little bit about you. And Louis Ogemah, your traditional name is Kijay Anaquat, which means fast cloud. You're an Anishinaabe artist from Daganag, I should have let you say that, First Nations from Ontario, and you've lived in Winnipeg, Manitoba since 1975. Everyone, Louis Ogemah works as a visual artist in painting, theater design, and installation art. Louis's art practice focuses on a wide range of themes, including traditional forms of knowledge, Indigenous healing, and the legacy of residential schools. Louis is co-founder of the Urban Shaman Gallery in Winnipeg and frequently works with youth and engaging and emerging artists. So thank you, both of you, for joining me on this first Friday.
Well, thank you for having us.
It's really nice to talk with you. I'm looking forward to it. Debbie, would you like to begin by telling us a little bit about, did I say the right things about you? Do you want to say anything about yourself in your hello, or do you just want to get straight into talking about 50 to 500 and the gallery?
I just want to make a little correction. I'm not the interim curator. I'm the interim director. Curation is not really my background. I have done some, but more in media arts, like video art, as opposed to, say, two-dimensional art, like paintings and things like that. That's not really my background, but thank you. Yeah. So with 50 to 500, it's a members show and sale. And we don't normally sell artwork, but this is just something that we do to show our appreciation for our membership. And our membership is very diverse. So we have works by local Indigenous artists and as well as other members that support us throughout the year. They're our allies. And it's a good way too for like younger emerging artists to have something in a show for the first time, to get a little insight into what the process is, getting things ready, preparing bios, labeling their work, having people see their work. So it's an interesting show because it's not a curated show. And so it's always interesting to see what's going to show up and fun placing it, putting it on the walls, seeing what works together and things like that.
So did you put everything that sort of came in from members right on the wall and in the gallery?
Yeah, usually they'll bring their work in and then we'll start by unwrapping it, and then I'll go around with Teo, and we'll sort of like put them on the lean them up against the walls and kind of see, like how the color is working. Can we tell a little story within the placement? It's hard to do with a show like this because the work is so different. Whereas in a curated program, the process of curating would be to tell the story by how you place the work, how you show it. Whereas this, we're kind of looking more at aesthetics, what things seem to go well together, making sure like one wall is not just too dark, and just kind of trying to balance it in that sense. So everything that came in is being shown.
Well, that's a great opportunity for everyone just to sort of participate, and it kind of makes it like more of a community event, really.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the best part about it. Especially in the beginnings, a lot of the Indigenous organizations were more community based. So you did see a lot more styles of work. Artists tend to work more together. It was less, in some ways, more free flowing, less, there was obviously some planning, but I think you and I discussed earlier about how in the early days, before we actually had a gallery of our own, that we would host events like coffee houses, and people would show up with their musical instruments, people would show up with their beadwork, people would show up with paintings or prints or books, and it would just happen. So it was way more spontaneous. And so things have changed over the years, but I think what's interesting about this show is we've tried to reach out and ask people, because we don't pay artist fees for 50 to 500. But we were just trying to see, like, if you have some media artwork, maybe a video or something or installation, feel free to bring those and exhibit that as well. We had a couple of people show up and do readings. We had a young hip hop artist, do a little performance of his work as well. So it was a little bit of an interesting opening in that sense to have artists in different mediums show up and share their work with us.
So you had more of a media element to your opening, so that's kind of cool to sort of flash back to that and to incorporate what different members really are doing. Are there any other sort of media elements in the gallery right now?
We have a work by Jonathan Kevin Couchman, and his is a video which features his photography and the work that he's been doing to learn his language. Jonathan is also a musician, so he's created his own soundtrack as well. We do have a video as well by Derek Bruckner, who's been a longtime supporter of Urban Shaman and used to do a radio series with the former director Dana Warren called Eat Your Arts and Vegetables. So it is nice to show different mediums. Like our people and our members work in a variety of mediums. Like they sculpt, they paint, they do prints, they do digital collages. They do beadwork. It's such a variety, and I think that's the greatest part of the show is the variety of work that comes in.
We've just got up on the screen this slide of this, I don't know, I called it like a broom gone wrong.
Oh, Connie, don't listen. No.
It's so kind of cool. All the tendrils at the bottom there, it's almost like a person hanging upside down as well.
That's my hair on a bad day.
And there are poor 50 hairs left.
Connie's a great supporter of our gallery. And she has been for a long time, and she's always a pleasure to speak to. She's always smiling, and we enjoy your company, Connie.
Nice. So, beside her work in the gallery is this Star Blanket series.
Yeah, Jasmine is part of a collective that has recently come to visit us called 20431. And they're a fairly diverse collective. They do have a lot of Indigenous membership as well. And so it's great to have them be a part of our gallery this year. So quite a few of their members submitted work this year. And these works are interesting because I like the intimacy of them, how small they are, and I'm not sure what it means to other nations, but for us, like a star blanket is a way of not only a beautiful piece of art, but also a way of honoring people. Like if you give them a gift, because you've made it, you've put so much time into it, and someone wraps you in it and keeps you warm. It's a very precious thing to receive. Like you would if your grandmother gave you a quilt, that you were. I love things like that.
Yeah, they're so intricate, and just the spatial relations you have to have going on in order to successfully make a star blanket. It's yeah, you have to have a lot of good skill.
And I think image-wise, it's also it's very strong. Like I find graphically, it's a very strong design. So I guess we just quickly switched from Raymond Catchway, also known as Nelson, and Nelson is an emerging artist as well, and he is interested in. We had a talk at length about some of the work that he is thinking of doing in the near future, and I think Geronimo is a kind of jumping off point for him for wanting to start to portray like positive Indigenous male role models. And so I asked him a little bit about this piece, and he says he likes to work in a grid pattern sometime. And he expressed, I think, at one point of perhaps going to art school. And I said, it's interesting because that's one of the things they get you to do when you go to art school is they get you to sort of break things down in a grid pattern. They also get you to do pixelation. Well, at least when I went to school, where you would break things down into pixels or and then you would try and paint this portrait or this image using a lot of color blocking, and then you would stand 100 feet away from it in order to see what it really was. So I'm really interested to see what he's going to do in the future as he journeys on this new series that he's wanting to work on.
Cool. Are there any other pieces you'd like to talk about specifically in the gallery?
There's so many interesting pieces. So the piece that is, the Jessie Januska one with the jingle dress dancer. Jessie is an amazing artist. Like her beadwork is phenomenal. And so I love what Jessie does because she's so, she's likes to portray her culture. She likes to be involved, with educating people. And I think, the jingle dress is a very powerful image in our community. It's a healing dance, and I'm not sure, I didn't count the jingles in her drawing, but I believe there's supposed to be 365 days, 365 of them representing the 365 days in the year. But I myself am not a traditional dancer, so I can't really speak too much about the symbolism there. Let's see, what else is there? I love Casey's work. I loved her Cyborg series, and that is the portrait that you see up there of a very good-looking Indigenous man, along with the choker that he's wearing. Casey was one of the earliest artists that Urban Shaman ever exhibited, and but I'll let Lewis talk a bit about that later on, about because it kind of speaks to why we needed our own gallery. Because her work is very contemporary and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think back prior to us having our own gallery, I think, we kind of had limitations forced on us. Like people had their own ideas of what Indigenous art should be. And it took a long time for people to open up to contemporary practice. It was either you did woodlands or you did West Coast. But of course you can't do West Coast because those are family designs. They belong to their clans. So you can't just decide you're going to do West Coast style art, right? And not everybody thinks in a woodland style either. So I think, I just think Casey's work is beautiful. And I like her range of styles. I like how she's always exploring throughout her career different things. But I don't want to take up all the time, so
I'm wondering if you could just say just a little bit more about artist-run centers, and then we'll talk to Lewis about about regeneration in front of which you see him sitting?
I think artist-run centers in general are important because you, as an artist, you need a place to show your work. It gives you experience in how to prepare for shows, what goes into it. I think people always, it's like in any medium, right? Like if you're a performance artist in theater or a dancer, you never see what goes into it. You only see the finished product. And I think people can think of art exhibitions that way, like, it's just art hanging on the wall. And it's like, no, it's not just art hanging on the wall. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that will bring you the show. And I think it's a good education for artists if that's the route that they want to take. I think it gives you experience. Over time, it can show your growth, how you develop as you grow. And I think, it's a good way, like public art institutions, like artist-run centers, are a good way for people to know what's really happening in their communities and to see what's, even nationally or internationally, because we do bring in international works as well. And I think it's a place where you can come, where you don't have to drop, $15 on a ticket or whatever the price is to get into the bigger galleries. People should be able to see art. And I think, they should be able to see art, and I don't think they should have to go broke seeing art.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting when there's, like public funding for galleries, and then you can't see it if you don't have any money.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we paid for it in other ways, through, your tax.
And I think with artists, we tend to tackle subjects that people can't necessarily articulate. So when things are happening socially, it's usually the artist that will tackle the subject because they're trying to deal with it too. And I think it creates an open dialogue or brings awareness to things that maybe people don't really think about. But it can either be in your face or it can be very subtle, or it can cause you to think about it and, give important things some thought.
I think that's such an excellent point to move to talking to Lewis about regeneration. Thanks, Debbie, for talking about those matters. And Lewis, you're in the center of the gallery there with your installation. So where do you want to start with talking about it? I see the yellow banner just on your right, and the red banner just behind you, and the bed. Can you explain a little bit about the structure of regeneration, or why it's important to be part of the 50-50 or 50 to 500 members show and sale right now? Where do you want to start, Lewis?
Well, to be part of the 5500, I do have a couple pieces that were here at the show, and but I also thought about this show because I felt, because of the last couple of years, seeing as the graves that have been found, starting out in BC, and of course the stories that I know because I did attend residential school in the 1960s and 70s. So it became very important for me to try and to have it shown again, because this piece of work that I've done since probably since my thesis year in 1992, and in 91 we're doing the Oka thing, but in 92 this was my thesis year, and I started moving towards I want to do a thesis, and that was my thesis, was trying to figure out what I want to do for that year. And during that time, the centerpiece came out at that time through a period of discussions, because I start off with very large paintings at first, about some of what I visualized. And I remember the school, and I made these large paintings. And my brother Sam, I had him over a few times, and we were discussing some of the work. And then I started moving towards thinking about how do I physically try to get the um, the piece so that it speaks for itself without having to be there, kind of, as opposed to making paintings. And I wanted to move away from that. So I started thinking about, and it was during this because I was attending ceremonies during that time, and I remember seeing this vision when I was in the sweat lodge, and in my mind where things were going for me. And one of the things I saw was this bed, and the bed was the bunk bed because we slept in bunk beds in residential school, and I slept on the top bunk bed, top part of the bunk bed, and so as this came about, I saw the when I was developing the show. That's why there's lights underneath the main piece, and that's the bed, and there's lights underneath it blinking, and that's usually when they throw cedar and other medicine onto the grandfather rock started inside the sweat lodge. You see the sparkle showing up. You see this kind of things happening with the stones, and so that's what I wanted to reflect on this bed. I want this thing to be, and above the bed was going to be this vision that I had, and that's where it started from. And during that time, I made this the piece. I looked at the two parts of it, and the bunk bed became part of this piece. And as I developed, my brother came over because he came with when I was doing the paintings, and he came over again when I was doing the installation piece, the bed part. And we sat there and we talked about it, and I told him that this bottom part was going to be the institution part, how we had to make the beds in such a way. And if you didn't make it right, they tossed a blanket, and that meant that you had to remake it again to make it fit right, or to make it look right, to be clean and everything. And so I remember those kind of things that we had to go through. And you got to remember, I was pretty young then. I went there when I was 5, and I came out when I was about 12. So looking at those kind of how this fit within my world, and as a child, you're being institutionalized, and that's what that bottom part of the bed represents, is the institution, and the top part is something different. It's more a cultural perspective of how we see death. Because this whole piece is an altar to my family, and that's why I use eagle feathers. You know, if I use paper feathers or something that's not uniform to this piece, then I'm not respecting my family. And to me, this is an altar, and I have to use the actual items for that. And that's the eagle feathers, the fans, all that part is what I'm honoring my family with. And that's my parents as well as my kokum, because she attended the same school that I attended. And same with my parents, they was in the same school. In fact, that's where I got a lot of those images. Well, for my parents was through research work, and that was later on in 1996. But prior to that, in 92, I was working on this piece, and I talked to my brother about this piece, and then he offered up his T-shirt. I said, I still have my T-shirt from residential school, and that's the one that you see on the bed, and his jean pants. So that's what he said that he would contribute. Well, he said he would give it to me for the bed part. So I did that, made the fire blanket, got the fire blanket, and the red it has lots of symbolism in terms of color and of blood, of power, of all those things that come with it. And it's that's what it reflected to me as well. And so when I built the piece, and we had a student art show, I think it was in March or April 1992. So that was 91, 92. And 92, that's when I put it up for the thesis art show. And I put up my pieces here, and that's when I talked to, I believe it was Professor Cavalier. And he wanted to take photographs of the piece because he had said he hadn't seen anything like this before, which talked about the historical colonial aspects of what I was exploring at that time. So that's what this piece was. And that was before the Birchbark books came in, because I was still trying to navigate through this. And then it was later on in 1996 that I rebuilt the bed. And I also got the birch bark pieces because I want to have a show for it at the Urban Shaman Gallery. And that's when it was over on 91 Albert Street, down in the basement there, or the concourse, as I like to call it. I call it the concourse. And just to give it a more dignified name. And there I had my family actually helping me put the pieces together. My sister, Sally and Cynthia, they kind of stitched the books together. And I had all the pieces made. I think it was in that spring. I put the pieces together, and that's a picture of my kokum there. And the pieces I put together were I went and got the birch bark in Ontario. I put out tobacco for all the pieces that I was using, like the birch bark, other materials I needed from out in Ontario, and I brought them back here and I started working on them. And at that time, I was using photolite emulsion, so I made well over 100 pieces, and not all of them turned out. It was a sort of a touch and go kind of situation with the images actually showing up on the birch bark, and some of them made it through and they survived. It's been about a good 24 years or something like that, and they're still here. So it's amazing that I've lasted this long. And the significance of the birch bark is that was what we used to record our songs, our ceremonies, and the conductor, whoever was conducting the ceremonies, usually knew what symbols they were using. They understood what those symbols and designs were for. And so the same idea is being done here with these birch bark books, is the same idea of having these images showing my family. And there's my the one there that Dale was looking at is my uncles and my mom. So those are just like, or is that? Yes, no, that's I think that's my kokum, I believe. Yeah. So it's I can't really see that image, but it's there. And so, like I said, a lot of them turned out really well. And like I said, my family helped me stitch them together. And I kind of, my brother and I worked on the outside of the gallery, putting in the willow sticks along the edges. And we wanted to make it into I wanted to make it into a sweat lodge kind of look, because that's where I had the vision. And so this piece here now has the banners to represent the colors, and also to highlight that central area where the lecterns are, because the lecterns is the piece that represents the churches, and the churches were play a significant part as well, because the churches were the agents of the government that carried out this what John A. Macdonald had done some research in the States, and they came back and this is what they were going to do, and put the residential schools in place. And so the churches became the agents of that. And so that's what the lectern represents, and the bottles represent part of the other part, which is the alcohol abuse, the addictions, all those things that cause us the misery. Because in order to forget about what things happen in our lives as children in terms of childhood traumas, the only way we can try to forget is by turning to something that's not healthy for us and trying to forget the past. But one thing about the past is won't let us forget. And the thing I think that's the key part of the healing process is we try to forget about the past, but the past doesn't forget about us. It just sits there and waits, and it stays with us. And it's how we deal with it. Instead of putting Band-Aids on it, we have to take the Band-Aids off, and we have to look at it and really heal for ourselves. And so a lot of the stuff that was going on last year with the graveyards being found, also, we heard these stories back in Ontario. I was 10 years old when I first heard about some of the what I thought were atrocities, and about children and what was going on with at that age. And really like horror stories, like babies being thrown in boilers, these kind of things that were born, and just all kinds of terrible stories. And for a 10-year-old, it's hard to imagine that. And my brother told me, Sam said to me, that means we're all in danger. That's what it means. And for us, that's what we have to live with, being in that school. So this part here, like the east represents the That's where my kokum was in CJ School, Cecilia Jeffrey Residential School in Kenora, Ontario. And that's where it begins with her. Now, at that time, my kokum, she was born in 1910, 1911, somewhere around there. I can't remember the dates. But during that time, she went to residential school as well. But she also had a really strong connection to our culture, to our belief system. And she was also very much a practitioner of the Medewan. She was, when she was after, this is a picture of my kokum there in the steps of the school. And that's with her friends. That was in probably 1929. That's when the school first opened up. But she went to the original one in Shoal Lake. They built one there in the early part of 1910 or roughly around that time. But she also went to that school. And they transferred to Kenora, where they built a bigger school. And that's the one I went to. And this is where, that's the school itself right there. And it's boys' dorm was on the right side, if you look at it straight on, and the girls' dorm was on the left side. And it's the kitchen area or the cafeteria area was in the more of the basement area in the middle. And then the administration offices were in the middle. So all these things were all part of this whole piece. And so these stories that we were hearing back when we were 10 years old really horrified us. And it was something that we had to live with. And so when these things happened with the graveyards, it was something that I thought was really important to try and get this show back up during this period. And I thought 5500 might be a great place to do it at, because you have a lot of, there's lots of other artists who are contributing new pieces. And it becomes part of this history of Urban Shaman when it first started and the reasons why it started, and even the name. Where did the name come from? And those I want to share with you later on. But the whole piece itself is the altar, is the top part, is a cultural, is honorable way to die in terms of our cultural perspective. And you're put up on a scaffold to the creator, to Gishimana too. And that's how we used to do it pre-contact. Not because when contact came in, I think that's when we got into the whole burying as opposed to this older practice we used to have. And then, of course, the bottom part is the institution, which is the antiseptic part. And I was telling you about the bed. Another story I want to share was my brother would tell me about some of the experiences about, there was one painting I did, it was a family visit, and we talked about it, and it was just general though. It was like, I remember being at this family visit, and my dad and my mom were there, and it was around June of that year, and I think it was 1970, 72, 73, around that time. And we got out in 1974. That's when we last left that building. And I think some kids came back a couple of years later. I think burnt it down, 1978 or something like that. So this whole piece was put up in 1992. And by 96, 97, I had the show here in 1997 when it was on 91 Albert Street. And it was during that time I had the show here. And then I heard about the Survivors Conference in Kenora, Ontario. So I raised some money and I went down there, and then I asked if I could set up a show at the old band office. They said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I did, and I set it all up there. I had people coming in from the Survivors Conference. They came in to see the show. And it was really interesting because these were people who want to share their experience. And as we were talking, one lady asked me if I was physically or mentally or sexually abused, and I said, no, this is a political statement that I'm making about my family in 4 generations. And then my brother, sure you did. Remember we were talking about it, he said, and I said, what? And then he started telling this story about this one time that I was abused, and I thought, what? And as he was telling the story, my mouth dropped, and all of a sudden I remembered what he was talking about because my mind blanked it out. And it was just like it was gone. And then also when he started talking about it, it just went boom. It was there. And all of a sudden I was walking to town with my friends. That was Leo Strong. It was Vernon Fair. Parker Page was from Grassy, and we're all going to town. And I thought we were just going to town. Meanwhile, there was this plan that they were going to go home. They were planning to run away home, and I decided, well, I'm going to hang out. And I was the first one caught and in town and got brought back. And this is where I got taken in front of the dorm. All the kids were brought to the dorm, and they stripped me and they put me over. The supervisor said, "This is what happens to you if you ever try and run away." And they whipped me, and they took my clothes off and they whipped me. And at that time, I was on the ceiling. I could see myself as my brother was telling the story. I could see myself on the ceiling because my brother said he was really angry. He was very upset what was going on. And in a split second, I was inside my whole body again. All of a sudden, I was holding onto the legs of the chair, trying to get away from what was happening to me. And it was all in silence, though. There was no sound. It was all in silence, this whole memory thing that came back. And this was 25 years later. And then I asked my brother about it afterwards. He says, yeah. And he says, don't you remember when I was telling you Dad was mad at that family visit? He got up and he ran towards the building. I says, yeah. And I didn't know what it was about, though, because I had blocked it out. And he said, yeah, I remember I ran inside of behind him and you came behind me and then we went looking around and my dad was looking for that supervisor. And we were on the top floor, I believe, of the building. And my brother said, there he goes. And he saw him jump in his car and he drove away. And then Mr. Kitson, that was the principal of school, stopped my father and said, no, Mr. Ogemah, please settle down. We'll take care of this. And my dad told him if anybody ever touches his kids again, he'll kill them. That's what he said to this principal. And at that time, I didn't know what he was mad about. And for 25 years, I had blocked it out until that moment in the art show. And then these other ladies came and they started talking about their experiences. I believe their name was Lorraine Kenny. She actually did a run for me for the Thunder Bay Art Show. I showed it to Segay Walk. And after that, I took it over to the Thunder Bay Art Gallery, and that's where I asked Lorraine Kenny to write a piece about her experiences. And her sisters went to Shingwalk Residential School, and they said they would sit at the base of the bed of their bunk beds, and they would sit together, all three sisters, and they would talk about the moon, that their mother was watching the same moon, and they would keep to comfort themselves. And that's what they were going through at that time. And so we sat with them. We had tea and bannock there, and we all kind of talked and shared. And that's where that healing happens, because I was able to share something, and I felt safe. That's the thing about this experience, is I felt safe, even though that trauma was there. I felt safe because of the work that I was doing at that time. And all of a sudden, it spun on me on a dime, but I was able to recover right away. And I was still able to do my work and to talk about the work that I had done at that particular art show. One kid, I remember, actually one kid looked at my installation and said, "This is not art." And I said, well, it's like walking into a painting, I said. So just imagine walk into a painting. This is the painting. So he says, oh, wow, okay, I get it. He was only 8 years old. And then he said, could you make a painting like this for my room? Mom will like that. But yeah, so the piece itself, I used a lot of organic material. This is maybe around my 10th bed I built, because every time after I build it, I put it back out into the bush. I put tobacco in it, and it goes back to the earth. I mean, I keep the books and the lecterns, and actually the lecterns have gone through a different process as well. This is probably the fourth set of lecterns I've made. So it's keeps changing as it goes. So so that was the show itself, and I just had it recently. At Child and Family Services, they asked if I could put the show up, and then I said, okay, then I brought it here after that, and so then it'll rest again. So that's the regeneration. Oh, I should talk about the other pieces. Like I talked about my kokums, which was the yellow in the east, and then my parents were in the south. That's my dad there. That's at Round Lake, and they got a beaver there. They had set traps, And that was 1956 there. That's my father in the center. And they had set up some traps. And that's his friends there. I'm not sure of all their names. I think Garnet Aquans is in this picture as well, because they were best friends. And so, yeah, that's where my parents are. My mom's in this video, in this part as well. And there she is right there. She's at the reserve. One thing about this thing about residential schools is we did go home between June and September. So this is where the language was spoken. So here's a picture of, I believe it's my auntie. And in the back is the school. And she worked in the kitchen at some point when she finished there. She went back to work in the kitchen just to do the cooking and things like that. So this was that period from 1950s. And then on this side, over on the western side is where you'll find that's where my brothers and sisters were there. And there's different images in there. Mostly of it came later on. And so you see the bunk beds in the background. That's kind of shirts we wore at the time. And the bunk beds are in the back. So that kind of shows you that where the ideas were coming from for myself. And so then within the book itself, it shows about the traumas of the 70s. Well, the experiences of the 70s for us at that time. And that's me and my brothers there. And before we went to the school, I think my brother was probably going to school already by that point. And I believe I'm not sure what that one was. I'll probably have to get a closer look at it. And there's my family members. I think that's my sisters and my brothers. And so we were all together at that time. And this is now we're in Winnipeg. That's 1975, I believe. So we're 76 maybe. So we're now in Winnipeg. So we're part of that exodus that came to Winnipeg at this point in time. And that's me standing in front of the school. That was 1990. And I just came back from a vision quest. So the school's on the other side, would have been on the other side, but it's not there no more. That's Round Lake. And I just came out from a vision quest. And that's a picture of my sister. And that was, that's a residential school picture. And she was probably about 8 years old there. 7 or 8 years old at that picture. So that's her picture. I know there was one of me as well, but it never made the books. Let's see what else. Oh, then, going over to the north side, this is where the north is. This is where my sister, Genevieve, and, there's myself, Genevieve, and then there's, I believe that's Conway Jr. there at the bottom there. They never went to residential school, but they're impacted. And there's my two sisters, that's Cynthia in the back, and that's her son. And then my little sister JB's on the side laughing in the front, and I'm on the side on the left side. And this is our thing. We went to the Peace Walk that time. This is also at the Peace Walk, the first Peace Walk they had in Winnipeg. And that's my mom and my little sister on one side, and that's me on the other side. So this is where even though they didn't go to residential school, they were still impacted by it because of all the alcoholism, all the things that they've had to live through, because it's intergenerational. It just keeps on going until somebody starts working at trying to heal it. And my sister's working towards that, and she's in probably 50 now, I think. That's her and her daughter there. And, that's Genevieve or Miranda. But eventually, this whole thing about healing is that she's changing. I remember when I used to visit her, she used to be, her house was always messy, and she always put a blanket over her windows. So that was basically, and you couldn't really see the floor. And it was from neglect, and that's from neglect in the family home. And it transferred to her own living. And same with the kids. That's how they were doing things. You couldn't see their floor because their clothes were all over the place. He says, how can you tell what's clean, what's dirty? He says, well, that's clean. That one over there is dirty. That's what he did. These are teenagers now. So, but my sister started changing. She's been changing for the last, I guess, 15 years or so in terms of her, healing. And now her place is immaculate. She's got past some of those things that she's carried from her childhood of having to live in a family that is, dysfunctional. And guys, that's what she experienced at that time. And so she's doing really well. She has a great job. So she's functioning well in that area. So that's what the North represents, because it goes back to the East after that. And so it's a continuous intergenerational cycle, but it's also about healing. Yes.
And if your sister's child has a child, then your sister is gonna be in the grandmother spot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a cycle, and I think the thing is, we have knowledge now when we get to this point of the North, and then she's able to pass on her knowledge as well as the rest of us, as well as great uncles and great aunts, to teach about our experiences, and that there is a way to heal, and that's what this show's about.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really sort of struck by, when I look at the different elements and I hear your story and of the things that should never have happened to you and your family, but I hear of your, that you're just looking to the future, and you're, looking to, part of the present, in the show is to provide a place of honesty for people, I love the story of Lorraine Kinney, when, she got to share her stories with you and you shared your stories with her, and just some of that truth telling that happens can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a survivor, to me, I don't see myself as a survivor, because that puts me in a victim mode, and once you get stuck there, it's hard to get out of that, because it's up here. It's everything's happening up here, and that's where that's got to change. And your whole attitude about that changes. It's about it's not our fault that my parents were, or it's not my fault that my parents' fault that they were alcoholic, or it's not my fault that I lived growing up the way it was, those situations, but it's my responsibility to change all that. It's my responsibility to do what I can to help the people around me, my community, my family, just anybody that I work with. It's all about trying to find a way to help people. And it's usually art, to me, is one of the most strongest ways to reach people, because sometimes they can't speak the struggles that they're going through, but through another medium they can actually speak through. They can, through painting, through drawing, through playing music, playing guitars or drumming or anything like that. It's a way of getting that here to heal up.
Mm-hmm. And when you're, talking about other mediums, it makes me think of, maybe there's a story where, you and Debbie met, where the two of you are being your creative selves, and your world started to meet.
Mm-hmm. That was 1989, I think, Debbie? 1989.
Yes.
It was a Wascan theater.
Yeah.
Time period. I believe Leah started off that thing with Manitoba Public Theater. And at that time, I'd met both Leah and Lita prior to Debbie. I met them at Adult Ed School, Winnipeg Adult Ed School.
Okay.
And that's where I first met them. Yeah. And
I actually went there too.
But I didn't see you. We're probably in the same place, but I didn't see you at the time.
I was a freaky looking kid.
Oh yeah, I remember that person.
Yeah, that person.
Got involved in theater at the same time, and I was going to art school, and that's when I was doing a lot of research. A lot of research in terms of the woodland style, that kind of more so, because my father was a painter too, but he was more of a painter of more of a naturalist, and that's how he painted. He was an oil painter, and so he did that kind of work. He also knew Norval in Kenora, because he was up in Red Lake at that time, So they kind of hung out together. So they kind of knew each other. And so I kind of understood that I wanted to understand more about the woodland style. So I was doing a lot of reading and research about this. And this is where the urban shaman term came from, because Norval saw himself as an artist shaman, as a healer, an artist shaman. That's how he saw himself, and he was part of that group of 7 in the 70s. I think they were called the Professional Native Indian. I think that's what it was, the group of 7, I believe they're called, but they're also known as Professional Indian Artists. I think that's what they're called. And I think it was in 75. But that was the same year I came here, but I think that 75 is when they folded up. Ojig was on there. Daphne Ojig, Jackson Beardy. I met Jackson Beardy in 78. He was doing workshops at the U of M at that time. So I was in his workshop. He was teaching about how he does his work, and he did a legend, which I was familiar with because my dad tells legends too. So I was familiar with the legend. So it was pretty cool. And, but I was a naturalist as well. I drew in a more natural way. And, but during that time, I was researching Norval more. So that's where the term urban shaman came from, because I thought about the artist shaman. And then when I was working with, I believe, Tina Keeper, Joy Keeper, Herbie Barnes, and Billy Morasti. And we didn't see Billy that much, but we did some work. They used to stay on Payak. I think Joy stayed on Payak building here nearby on Isabel. And we did lots of just improvising and doing theater work inside the apartment and all that. And so we wanted to come up and do a collective. So we wanted to give ourselves a name. So I said, why don't we call ourselves Urban Shaman? And so Joy's contribution was turning the A into a Y, shaman, the shaman part. That's what the Y was, because she was taking feminist class and okay, whatever. And then we got the Cinnabon to do an actual mask drawing for the logo design. We were planning at that time, so that's where that name first came. Well, we didn't incorporate. That was the difference. We didn't incorporate the name, and because we all went our own separate ways. I went to Wawate. Tina went to Alberta to do the North of 60, and I believe Billy and Herbie went back to Toronto. And so, yeah, that's where that name came from. And then I met John Schneider, who was the co-founder in 93, 94, because I knew Louise Campbell in 92, and that they were starting up a co-op, and they were going to call it the Aboriginal Arts Group, I believe, at that time. And I met her in Edmonton. I did a little interview with her because I was working with Wawate TV, so we did a little talk. And when I came back to Winnipeg, I went to meet up with her, and they had a place over on Broadway, Shaganapi, I think they called it. It was part of the cooperative. It was a gallery. And yeah, at that time, the Aboriginal Arts Group started up about a year later. Then about 94, I met John Schneider. And him and I started working together. We started going to different functions, like for the, what was it called? Artist-run centers. I think they had a different name. Artist-run centers. I can't remember. I think it was artist-run centers. But I was part of. That's where I met Ahasu, Muskego, Nesquia, and
okay.
Skanawati. Skanawati. What's her real name? I can't remember. She goes by Skanawati. Ryan Rice. They worked on Native Love together. So they gave us a lot of experiences about what they did in developing their own collectives, their own gallery spaces. So at that time, we're working towards this goal of trying to start up a gallery. And I don't think it's given enough credit to John Schneider for being a significant part of this, what we're going through at that time. Mm-hmm. And I applied at Ace Art. I walked into Ace Art Gallery to talk to the director. It was Jennifer Woodbury at that time. And I said, this is what I want to do, and I want to do an internship here. And so we talked, and she researched on getting what kind of funding we could get. We got it from CARD, and I believe the CNAFB, I think it was called, the Canadian Native Arts Foundation. That was with Bell, the pianist, the guy who does the orchestra in Toronto or something like that. And he had a foundation for Aboriginal people going into the arts. So that's where we got the funding from. And so I did the 1 year with Ace Art, started in 95, September 95, right up into March 96. And then I applied for 4 shows. And I think I came up with the name on January 6, 1996, came up with Urban Shaman Gallery. And that was with Debbie Prince. I was tossed up a few names, but Urban Shaman was the one I wanted to stick to. So we went with that name, incorporated that name. And then we met, I think she said I said, we need somebody who's got some strong accounting skills and, you know, good for numbers. She says, well, I know Liz. And that's when we met Liz Barron in February. And so then we closed shop for a little while because there was nothing happening. And then I found out in June of that year that we got approved. So then it was just July. We built the 91 because I knew a lot of left-wing people, one of them being Paul Burrows and a bunch of other left-wing people. And he gave us cheap rent, and we built the space in July. And Lita's partner, John Jansen, he had carpentry skills. We didn't. And he helped us put up walls, put up ceilings. I actually got a videotape of it all, so it's all there. So it's kind of documented in that sense. And there's photographs we all took. And Leah, their friends, they were a big part of it, helping paint the walls and everything like that. So it was really neat the way it all came about. And actually, Lita was the first show. I think it was Anukiti, I think it was called. She did the first show, our inaugural opening in September 1996. And then after that, followed with Native Love. Yeah. So that's
Cool.
what.
I'm wondering, Debbie, if you want to talk about some of your influences in those early days as you were coming up as an artist.
Well, actually, I would have to say, when I first got to art school, a lot of people thought that I was influenced by woodland style, but I was actually influenced by comic books. And people thought I was influenced by woodlands because I used to outline everything with black. And the reason I did that is because I grew up reading comic books, and I just thought that's just what you do. And black just seems to just enhance everything. I think for myself, because things were really different back then. It was very difficult to find any books about Indigenous artists. And for me, I think I started to really look at more women artists. So for me, Kate Colwitz had a huge impact on me. I just really thought her work was intense, and I loved that intensity. And I also loved that, I guess, growing up, people in my family tend to be more musical. I tended to just like making things and collecting weird things and assembling things together. So I think, I do have a brother and sister, but I didn't find that out until, almost 20 years ago. But I was raised as an only child, so I always had to amuse myself. But I think, I think for me, starting out, we didn't have a lot of money. My mother was a single mother. I taught myself how to draw and paint because I wanted to decorate my room. I couldn't afford, my parents couldn't afford to buy me, pictures. So I thought I'll just make my own. And so when I first started out, I was really into hyperrealism. And then, my parents got me a camera, and I thought, well, who needs to do hyperrealism? I got a camera now. So started to really deviate from, that kind of realism. And I started looking more at shape, and I started looking more at color and I guess dualities, or, how things can mean more than one thing. So that was a big thing for me. And then, I always liked to write. When I was in junior high, I got accused of plagiarism by my English teacher. our assignment was we could either write poems, stories, print out music lyrics, or copy poems that we liked. But I thought, well, I already got a stack of stuff that I've been writing. So I handed that in. And then I got called into the principal's office and accused of plagiarism. And I said, well, who am I plagiarizing? And they couldn't tell me. So they called my mother and my stepfather in, and my mom just kind of looked at them and went, well, you know, she's an odd kid. She just sits in her room. She's always writing in a damn book. So then luckily my English teacher realized, you know, that I like to write. I mean, I've been reading adult books since a little kid because my parents would caretake. And when people would move out, they'd always leave books. And my parents would just say, someone moved out, left a bunch of books, and they'd just give me all these books and I would just read them. So anyways, my English teacher wound up actually giving me a lot of her own personal books to read. And that was cool. Yeah.
It's important when your mentors like really sort of see you for who you are, and they're like, here, I see you.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I was an odd kid, and I think part of that was, you know, I grew up in West Broadway. We always lived close to downtown, and, you know, as a young girl, you find ways to protect yourself. And for me, just looking odd, acting odd was a form of protection. You know, I thought at one point, yeah, I could maybe disguise myself as a boy and be safe, but honestly, I wasn't any safe. You know, pretending to be a young boy either. So I think, you know, you find ways to cope with what's happening in your environment. For me, art was a big thing. It was somewhere that I could go. I didn't have the same interests as most children. Was not interested in playing dolls. I knew from the age of 4 or 5 that I never wanted to have children.
Yeah, me too. You know, I'm thinking about sort of the, I'm just having a look at the time.
Yeah.
Just kind of cut in, and wanted to acknowledge someone in our chat.
Okay.
To Carlin Smythe has said, like, thank you, Lewis, for all artists who have found a way to heal and to move forward. And Lewis has thanked him back. Thanks everyone for your warm thoughts. And I just wanted to talk a little bit too about sort of like a looking forward. I'm going to take a couple more minutes. We're a little bit over time, but I wanted to take a couple minutes to sort of talk about, you know, a future for Urban Shaman, and, you know, what do you dream of in terms of like a future, you know, what Urban Shaman could be, or different organizational styles that you would really prefer to have than this one that you've got right now?
I'm going to let you address that, Lewis, as a founding member. I think, you know, you had your vision.
Mm-hmm. Have you got Theo in the back there somewhere? Theo? We love Theo. But I think he's behind you, Debbie. Because he left his camera over here. I wanted him to go to the painting.
1 second, I'll go get him.
Go get him. Put him beside the painting there.
Remember which one? Yours?
The drum painting with the landscape. Remember the one thing I did back in 98, 99?
Oh, okay.
Hanging on the wall. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this back in I think it was around 1999, I did a talk with, not a talk, it was actually, we had this funders that were coming down to the gallery, and they want to have a discussion with us on part of the board. So that night before I started making this painting and I started working on this painting, what I want to show was the vision of Urban Shaman Gallery in the future. This is what I want to see. And so I did this painting. I think this is one that they were showing now. And it's a drum, and it's the design of the building is like a drum, and it's in the front there, because in the front there's a sculpture piece in the front. There's a sculpture in the front. It's got Big Bear and Poundmaker, and they were in chains. They're actually that's when they were at the Stony Mountain Penitentiary, and so that's the kind of images that were at the front there. And of course, on the side, we're going to be like a campus kind of area. So there'll be different kind of, like say music or anything else that, other places like sculpture, but this would be sort of the main Urban Shaman building in the center. And this is what I had there. And I believe, they came down, we had a discussion in the main hall, and I had this painting in the back. And so they came out, and I had it set up like this as well. Plus, I also had this little guy, and he was recording the little guy, and it was Dr. Evil going like this. And so as they were talking, I said, well, if you're talking about money, I says, you know, what we need, and we're talking about what we need to get to this place, press that button. It'll tell you what we need. And the guy pressed the button, he went, $1 million. I thought it was funny, but yeah, they smiled. That was funny. It was Austin Powers, of course, Dr. Evil guy, right? And for us, you know, the way I thought about it at that time is we needed an infusion of money so that we can do what we need to get done to reach this point, you know. And that's what I was suggesting at that time. And I know it takes a long time before things go in place. And being as an artist-run center, I've seen other artist-run centers. It took them plug in how many years? 31 years or something before they got up more on Portage Avenue, something like that, since the 70s. So it takes a long time to get to that place, and that's what the vision was for me, was to get to that point. And right now we're heading towards that. And hopefully we'll be doing that in the next couple of years, finding the space that we're working in conjunction with Center Venture and other partnerships. Hopefully we'll get to that space. That's the future.
And what about incorporating Indigenous forms of governance into a new center or a new incarnation?
Well, when I first wrote up the bylaws, I wanted it to be a clan system model. That's the way I wanted it to be. I have an understanding of the clan system model. There's 7 clans. 2 clans in place are, one is the Hmong, the Loon, and the other is Jabak, the Crane clan. And those are leadership roles. So if one is elected, the other one always keeps him honest. So that's basically what happened. Same with the Loon. If they're elected as the chief of this community, then the Crane makes sure that they stay honest. And then you got all these other, like I said, my particular clan is diplomacy. So that I would have a specific area as well. So I wanted to fit this kind of clan model. But you know, the way the structure is placed in terms of MAC and Winnipeg Arts and also Canada Council is they only recognize president, secretary, vice president, treasurer, and it doesn't fit within their idea. So it's still a very colonial model. And so I wanted to go to that. But seeing as they didn't recognize it, I said, well, I guess we'll have to switch back to using the format that they understand, that they feel safe with, as opposed to a new model. That's still, yeah.
What do you think it would take to get that?
Oh, reconciliation.
You know, I think honestly, there were a lot of barriers, institutional, systemic barriers in place. And I think, you know, a lot of work's been done to push forward. When I think about, I think we can actually do it now, Lewis. I really, honestly, truly think we can, because I don't think the way that we're doing things right now really works for us. It works. I mean, yeah, okay, we'll say we'll have this board, but we need to do it our own way for it to function. You know, and I think what I love about history and what I love about the past, you know, is to learn from it. And I think, you know, we need to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And whether the colonial beings that be can handle it or not, that's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think as long as we're functioning and we're setting out to do what we say we're going to do, and we can prove that it works, we need to start, you know, it's like regeneration. It's like, you know, maybe part of that regeneration is going back and bringing back what worked, bringing back what was good, bringing back what was healthy, and start laying that new foundation and then that new path for those that are coming up behind us and who are going to have to carry this on for our community and for our people.
I want to add on to that too, because when Urban Shaman, when we were working on it, the idea was that, because I noticed, like when I was going to fine art school and going through that I noticed, like being part of the community at large, artist-run centers or marginalized groups couldn't even get in there as Aboriginal people. We're even more marginalized. So that was the problem. So when we were at this pivotal point at Ace Art and being able to say, okay, we're going to move on, I said, well, we have to try out our own wings, because it was asked to, why don't you stay under our wings for a while till you guys get your footing, a couple of years, that kind of thing. I says, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. We can't be, you know, under anybody. We have to go up and do it. And that was the idea at that time. So, and that's when we just ventured out.
And I think that's the best thing that, you know, you could have ever done, because, you know, me personally, if I have to fight too hard to belong somewhere, then I really don't want to belong there, right? Like I want, you know, why? You know, like, why would you want to be somewhere where they don't want you? You just make your space, you create your space.
That's the thing. That's like the jury process is the same.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen lots of Aboriginal artists going through, and I was part of like watching, observing these things, and they couldn't get in because, of course, they didn't quite understand the work, and of course, it didn't quite fit what the marginalized group was trying to put in their shows. So it was all back to that again, and same with the whole idea about trying to get our community. You need a resume in order to start having shows. And for newcomers, for people who are new artists, emerging artists, how can they build a resume if they can't even have a first show? So that's what Urban allowed, was you're going to have the first show here. And when you see an artist, a young artist putting up their works, their eyes, the sparkle in their eyes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing to see. You know, for me, it's like, that's what I want to see. And then, of course, when I talked to Larry Morissette, and it was Larry Morissette, because they were working with youth back in the 90s. And he said youth are our priority right now. So I was thinking, okay, well, then we should have something here as well for Urban Shaman. That was when Pointing with the Lip started, because I need to work with schools. So we worked with Garden City, we worked with Marymount, we worked with Rising Sun School at Rossbrook House. And these are 14-year-old kids, and we gave them artists from our community to work with each one of them, or at least like as a group, to show them different things. So it really worked well. And that was the whole idea, is because they were in the youth were struggling. That's what they were going through at that time. And we need them to have an outlet.
That's a really great throw to the future, and our time is really it's up. Our time is
It's just begun. No,
well, yes, in a way, it's the future.
Yeah.
It's a regeneration, looking to the, learning from the past and looking to the future. I just want to say thank you to Debbie. Thank you so much for your stories. Thank you for showing us through the gallery. Thank you for being here and doing so much of the work in bringing this talk to fruition. And Louis, I also want to thank you for sharing your stories and for reminiscing. I've got a note here from Louise May saying thank you to everyone. And Louis, it's wonderful to hear you talk. Another note from Melly O. Thank you for this lovely talk. It was nice to get to know you both, Debbie and Louis, more. I just want to say again, thanks for talking to me today and for showing us the gallery. So
I want to say thank you for inviting us, and thank you to the people who have, tuned in and are listening, and thank you.
I too want to thank everyone for being here and to allow me to talk about the historical significance of this gallery and what we went through in terms of the struggles. And it's been, 26 years now? So it's
Yep.
always hoping for the future. Hope is a good thing. And I think we should live for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. So that I'm going to say that concludes our art talk for today. There are so many things still happening tonight around town, and I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, to the Winnipeg Free Press, to the Manitoba Arts Council, the Winnipeg Arts Council, to Collective Broadcast. Thank you so much, Erin, for all of your work today. Thanks also to Teo in the background doing the camera work. That was really great to be able to see some of the work up close. Thanks also to the Exchange Biz for their sponsorship in our printed First Fridays guide. And honestly, thanks to the First Fridays board too, who makes this possible. So I wish you all a very lovely night, and we'll see you again.
All right.
Everybody stay warm.
Very frosty out there.